Welcome back to Coats and Conversation. I'm your host, Kendrique Coats, a therapist who works with couples and athletes in Alabama and Illinois. In today's conversation, I sit down with Barb Smith, who is a former Division I basketball coach, former D1 athlete, and now is the owner of Find My Team, which is a specialized recruiting service to help athletes and families navigate recruiting. In the first part of this episode, we talk all things recruiting and NIL. And we know that the game has changed. It's not like what it used to be years ago. NIL and these collectives have taken over, and many families, as Barb points out, don't understand what comes along with some of these NIL deals. We then go into what families and athletes should be doing to prepare for the recruiting process. And then later on in the episode, we talk about athlete mental health, which is something that I'm extremely passionate about as being a former athlete and former coach. I think that the one thing that stood out in this episode, which Barb highlights, is athletes sometimes don't understand the importance of finding the right fit, the right culture, and ultimately the right university. I think it's really easy for athletes these days to be convinced to go to a specific university for NIL or other perks, but don't understand, okay, is that coach going to take interest in the athlete's development, long-term development? The culture and the fit of the team, is it the right place for athletes? And so I think for this episode, I think a lot of parents and athletes are going to find value in this because there are so many athletes out there that are trying to get that scholarship. All of these things come into the recruiting process, and Barb has the perfect solution for that, in which she is helping so many athletes find their team. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did having it. So, Barb, today in our conversation, as we talk about recruiting, NIL, all things within sports, I was just thinking about my own journey when I was a young high school athlete, having these huge aspirations to play at the D1 level. I think Reggie Bush was one of my role models at the time. And Lord knows I had no business thinking that I was going to go to USC and play football. And things have changed over the past 10, 15, even 20 years as it relates to recruiting, NIL, et cetera. So for you, you've been in sports for a long time. You've seen all of the changes that have happened. So what have been some of the biggest changes that you've seen when you were in coaching versus now as it relates to recruiting?
Yeah, I started coaching in 1986. And in 1986, we weren't allowed to give our players a piece of gum. That was a violation. Or we weren't allowed to take a picture of them on a campus visit and give it to them. And there weren't cell phones and all these new, all the gadgets that you have today. So that just means I'm 100 years old, but sports, college sports has changed so much. And, it sort of were gradual changes. I mean, the recruiting calendars have always changed. When you could go out, the development of the whole club scene was all huge changes when I was coming in. And the fact that you couldn't, send in a letter, back snail mail deals, you couldn't send a colored graphic, but you could send black and white. And there was like these huge debates about this stuff, like trying to keep the competitive balance out there in college sports. And man, when you look at it today, it's times, 10, not only the changes, but at the rate of which they're coming. So in the last, 10 years, it's almost been double time. And back then it was more these, how do we keep it balanced? How do we keep it balanced? Roster size, up and down, color or not color. Can you email? When can you call? And all the rules were changing all the time. But today the changes are, obviously immense. And I believe that they are really affecting the college recruiting process more than any of the changes that I went through.
You, there's it's so It's so difficult, I'd imagine, for parents, athletes, just even trying to figure out what all they need to do in the recruiting process, which we'll get more into that as our conversation continues. You are the CEO, owner, founder of Find My Team, which is a recruiting service that educates athletes and parents on the nuances of the recruiting process. Why is this work so important to you?
It's important to me because as a coach, I coached for 30 years and I was able to see the difference between a student athlete really, really, really thriving in college and others who sort of just survived through college. And what I found was that the ones that were thriving usually left college thriving, and the ones that were surviving usually left college surviving. And so that it took them longer to be able to give back to their communities and to find themselves and all those things. So, and then I also got to see recruiting services out there that were, in my opinion, taken advantage of student athletes and families. And there's a whole plethora of recruiting services out there to choose from. Some of them probably better than others, and some of them more sincere than others. But what's missing, and what I found was missing in the whole recruiting, journey of a student athlete, is the guidance on what does it mean when a college coach does this, says this, sends this, whatever. When should I start? What should I be doing at this time? What are the rules here in this sport versus that sport versus my junior year, my freshman year? What should I be doing in all these different years? And so that's why I'm very passionate about helping these families. I'm very passionate because I think every student athlete, number one, if they want to play college sports, there's a path, there's a way to do it. It may not look like your way in your head when you start, but there's a way to get to a college experience, and everyone deserves to have a thriving opportunity.
I just was at one of your pathway to playing workshops, which was incredible. The amount of information that was there, and some of the stuff I wasn't even aware of, just because I've been out of the space of coaching and finding and figuring out all the nuances of recruiting. So, for you, as you're working with families and student athletes, what do families often miss during the recruiting process that you think they should be aware of?
I think two things. I think most families um, don't start early enough. And when you don't start early enough, you don't give your child enough time to try college on. So, there's a lot of time in there between an eighth grader and a senior in high school to try a lot of things, figure out a lot of things. But most families wait until somebody reaches out to them. And that's when it clicks in that they should start. But my whole thing is you can start way before that. Get yourself set up, get all the tools in place, and be ready for that moment. And the second thing that I think is a misconception is that all as a parent, all I need to do is get my child on a great club team or a great travel team or, set up with a great personal trainer where they can get these stats out or be in these, tournaments where they get their stats out and basically let exposure be the only thing that they're willing to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for in some cases to get on these teams to be seen. And I think that's a myth because even those kids, even those families, there's no guarantee that you're going to be found or seen, especially today with the changes. But more importantly, it doesn't mean you're going to get a scholarship. There's so much exposure is important, but it should not be driving. There's so many other things that need to be done.
Families aren't starting early enough. Should they start third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade? And the reason why I asked that question is I think we may have talked about this before. When I was living in Texas, they had, which is sports in Texas. I was not prepared to walk into that scene at all. But they had I want to say it was a 5U, 6U T ball championship tournament that they were having in Houston. And I mean, the amount of money that parents and families were spending to go to this championship event was crazy. So when's too early? Is third, fourth, fifth grade too soon? Is sixth grade too soon?
I think, I think 8th grade is a good time to start the recruiting process. That's when it makes sense for student athletes to even start thinking about it long term like that. If you're talking to your player, your child about, being an Olympian at age 2 or 3 or 4 or 4th grade, whatever, I think that's starting the pressure cooker. I think that's starting to put way too much pressure on them, and at that age, number 1, in my opinion, these kids should be cross-training, not specializing so early,
Mm,
and, number 2, they should be having fun with it. Sports is fun when, there's socialization, there's running around, it's good athletic, exercise. They're feeling supported by their families and their friends' families, and it's more of a, it's sort of like trying sports on even, just get out there and have some fun.
mm. There've been athletes that I've been around that talk about, "Hey, coach, I need to get to the bag," when regarding NIL and these collectives. Can you talk a little bit about what the differences are between NIL versus collectives?
Well, there's a little bit of a battle going on right now, actually, because yes, there's a lot of money going around, but when you think about it, like if you break it down like this, there's the academic money, and colleges need outside entities to help with that. And now, with the whole blowing up of the education department, that's even going to be more and more important to be able for these schools to keep running. And then the second part of that is there's this whole collective group that you're talking about, and that's made up of boosters. And the boosters have money, and this money they're pooling so that they can help with NIL. But now there's a whole nother um, need, and it's with the house settlements. And I know that we could go in and talk about the legalities, but basically, the house settlement passed, and so now these schools, and you could opt in or out, most opted in, have to back pay these athletes 10 years. So for 10 years, they're going to be paying money to these athletes who didn't get paid when they were in college using their name, image, and likeness. So that money is going to have to come from somewhere, and so it's going to be boosters, booster money for NIL, booster money for revenue sharing and the collectives, and some of these companies and boosters are still going to be part of the academic money as well. So they're getting stretched, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, in some cases, it's already some Division 1 schools have already gone Division 3 or 2 because they don't want to do that.
Yeah. Is there any difference with I've seen this, in the news just as far as athletes getting these NIL deals or I guess collective deals, and they're going to the school, and before getting there, they're promised all of this money. Are you seeing any of those things play out? And if so, what are some of the things that you would recommend athletes be aware of when it comes to the offers or signing a deal, NIL deal with any school?
Well, I think what most families do is skim and see the number at the bottom of the page, skim the facts and see there's a number down there that looks really, really good. And so this has already happened. Many of the athletes that have signed these deals did not get what they were supposed to get, but they didn't read the fine lines and the fine print and ask questions. And I think if you're going to entail any or accept any NIL deal or deal from a collective, you have to know exactly what's expected and how long it is. And you basically need a lawyer and a lawyer today to read over the stuff because the words matter. The way they're even put on the page matter. And there have been athletes who left schools for a big number, got to the new school, and then y- you know didn't get what they thought they were going to get because in the fine print, it says you have to be an All-American to get that money.
Interesting.
Or yeah, or a football player transfers for money, but he had 21 credit hours that did not transfer, and so he spent his entire summer working on at his academics just to be eligible to play at the new school. So then he didn't get to play that next year because he wasn't ready. So he may have gotten some money, he didn't get all of it because he wasn't playing. So there's just all kinds of things happening out there. You really have to be careful.
I was not aware of that. There which I guess at the end of the day, it's, the saying goes is read the fine print,
Mhm.
because I'm sure some of these situations, it's, there could be a number 1 pick in the portal this coming year, and if we offer this person all this money, it's almost like I don't know if this is the best way to say it, but almost luring the athlete there and then, "Hey, look, we don't have this money, so you're out of luck," which seems kind of crappy, maybe a little bit manipulative as well because you're dealing with 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids who they just wanna play. They just wanna play ball and also be able to have the resources to maybe take care of themselves or their families. So we talked a little bit about just as far as the NIL, and then also, some of the recruiting process before getting there, they're promised all of this money. Are you seeing any of those things play out? And if so, what are some of the things that you would recommend athletes be aware of when it comes to the offers or signing a deal, NIL deal with any school? What are some of the 3 key steps you would recommend families do before they even get involved in this recruiting process?
I think one of the main things to do, and definitely gets skipped till much, much later, is the self-awareness piece. If if your athlete knows who they are much better than they know right now, who they are and what they want out of a college experience, it makes the process much, much easier. And it makes it easier on the parents and the student athlete and everyone that's going to help them because the student athlete knows what they want. So if I'm my team, we help with that with this assessment. We have a PCM 6 plus assessment that these student athletes take. And anyone that works with us, whether they're late to the game or early, this is the starting point so that they know this is who I am, this is what I'm looking for. And now it makes it so much easier, to even get into the process and know what you're doing. The second thing is, I just think as long as you can, to be a multi-sport athlete as long as you can will help with longevity in sports. When you get to college, it's just pounding, it's year round, and it's really hard. And if all you've done is one sport that whole time before that, your body is going to break down. But if you can multi-sport, you're training different muscles. You're going to have a well-rounded body, so to speak, with it's just going to be stronger. And so, and I know parents, I know there's so much pressure to specialize early and, get because you're not going to have this, chance later if you don't get on the team right now and all of the stuff that some coaches use, but the person, the body needs to be able to last if they're going to make it to college. So I think multi-sport training is the best way to do that. And then lastly, like I was talking about before, I think you should try college on. I mean, in 8th grade, you're taking a vacation, a family vacation, you run by a school, you can go into that campus and walk around and take your youngster around and just bring it up. Like, does this feel kind of cool? You can also go to games. 8th, ninth graders can go to college games and just see, does that, what is the experience? How do they feel about it? And they start, picturing campuses and sports and everything early. So it's just this no pressure, trying things on when they can start formulating an opinion of their own about campuses and sports and college and all of that.
I like what you say is try the school on, and which was gonna be my next question, when the scholarships start coming in or the offers start coming in, how does an athlete know if it's a good fit or not? And you said, try the school on. And I almost think about it in the sense of when we go and buy shoes, we're literally trying the shoe on to see if it fits. How's it, do we look swag enough as some of the kids
Right.
say? Does it fit our personality? Does it fit our vibe? Does it fit what we are truly looking for? And what's interesting about this, Barb, is I've heard of athletes who, look the school up online. Hey, the school has my degree, and they get there and it's just like, this is not what I was expecting. And it also happened to me as well. Like I blindly went to a school when I was in college playing sports, and I was just like, I wish I would have gone to the other school because yeah, there's more opportunity here, but the coaches didn't really take interest in my development. Can you speak a little bit more about that as a former coach? When it comes to athletes looking for schools, what are some of the things that they should be looking into to make sure that the coaching or the coaching staff has their interest at hand and also is interested in their development?
First of all, we ask them, we find out through the assessment and some other things, we find out what are those things. Maybe some student athletes don't want to be developed off the field, let's say, off the court, field, rink, whatever, and some want both. And so we have questions set up to find out what matches what you want as a student athlete. And then you ask questions and you ask multiple people the same question and see if you get the same answer. And I think that's one thing to find out about the coaches. All this stuff is on social media too. You can follow people on social media and you can follow colleges on social media. And when flags come up, we talk about them. We find them, we talk about them, and then that gets like so recorded almost. Like this happened. We're gonna watch and see how this develops. I mean, there have been all kinds of things happening on campuses that don't fit the person who would want to go there. And so those are things that you can find easily by watching news and you know your social media channels. The other thing though is you have to look beyond the sport, in my opinion, because for example, I was a walk-on. I was a walk-on in college and I had to sit for 2 years. And if I didn't like the place I was at, if I didn't feel good about the dorm life and the academic life and the community life and the city life that was there, I may have not made it. But I knew that that's where I wanted to go as a fit for me, so I could withstand the hits until I earned a scholarship, started, and all the other good things that happened later. So I think you have to step out of the sport and look at things. I think you have to step in the sport and look at things. I think you have to, all of the coaches, all of the team, there are things that you need to find out so that you know exactly what you're getting into. I mean, you wouldn't drive a car off the lot without looking under the hood, right? To make sure that there's even an engine in there.
True, true. There's as we're talking about, try on the school, make sure it's a good fit, make sure it's a place that you wanna be. I think we have to throw in mental health in there as well, and I think that or I know that has been a conversation that has grown over the past several years. From your coaching experience, what were some of the things that you saw when you were coaching that often got unnoticed?
I think when I was coaching, and this is still the case somewhat today, but when I was coaching, and even when I played, you are not supposed to look weak. You are not supposed to be struggling in any way. So you had to show up and just fake it until you make it type attitude. And I think, yes, that still exists somewhat today, but I think having some Olympians come out, uh, like Michael Phelps and Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, saying that the pressure has caused me to have to step back. I think it has opened the door to some free talk about just mental wellness because I think today with the club sports the way they are, there's so much more pressure on these youngsters at an age where still supposed to be fun that it just really it's a pressure cooker. It builds, and there are some struggling athletes who aren't getting the help that they need, um, because they're not able to talk about it.
Mm. I think that's also something that even when I was coaching would come up. I didn't have the language back when I was coaching, which I was just like, "Oh, this athlete must be in their head." Knowing what I know now, it's they had some cognitive anxiety going on and they just couldn't even think, what they needed to do or make decisions, etc. The other piece of it as well is you mentioned how much pressure has been put on many of these young athletes, club sports, expectations from coaches, expectations from parents that are sometimes unrealistic and truly unfair. Because if we think about just the overall development of athletes, we have to ask ourselves, does it really make sense for athletes to spend the majority of their summer traveling to AAU or club soccer, basketball, whatever games? And in my opinion, I don't think so, which goes back to your point of how important it is to be a multi-sport athlete instead of dedicating all of your time, your free time to one specific sport. As you've worked with athletes and families over the years, have you found in your experiences that some parents are uncomfortable having that mental health conversation with their son or daughter?
It seems like it comes in, like, waves of parents, but it's very hard, and I know where this comes from because parents love their kids, and they want it so bad for their student athlete to be successful. Sometimes it's because they're comparing, sometimes because they didn't have it, sometimes because they just love their kids so much and they want it to go well, that they find themselves, sometimes not knowing it, I call this in the way. And they don't mean it to be in the way, but they fight battles. They'll get grades changed. They will do whatever it takes to help their kid get this thing that they want, either the student athlete wants or the parent wants. Sometimes that even becomes blurred. But there's so much that can be dealt with there so that we can figure out who this young athlete is. Do they want this? What is it they want? What does it look like? And when the parents can step away and see that, it becomes so much clearer that all they need to do is support. All they need to do is encourage and support. And it's gonna this little person is gonna blossom and become their own voice and their own opinion. They're going to know exactly what they want. And we help in that process to really lift up this person because it's their future. And the parents have to let go and people have to let go and just surround them with the things they need, the tools, the resources, but let them drive the process.
As we kind of wrap up this conversation, we'd be able to have probably a 2-hour conversation about this because we're both passionate about supporting athletes. There might be an athlete out there who's in middle school or high school just hearing this conversation, NIL, recruiting, maybe they're overwhelmed, maybe they're encouraged and motivated to, as I mentioned earlier, to get to the bag. If that person is listening and you had any advice to give them before they even made any sort of decision to play college sports, what would you give them that would support them mentally and physically?
I would say to anyone out there who's listening, student athlete or parent, that the student athlete is enough right where they are, with who they are, where they've been, what they've done. They are enough. And if they want to play, there's a path. And so, yes, it feels overwhelming or they're unsure of what to do next. If they need those answers, there are resources. Find My Team is one. There may be others out there, but to find a resource to help you start driving your process, I think that is the right route to go. And if you're really young, like, 6th and 7th grade, you should be having fun. You should be playing multiple sports if possible and just really enjoying it because the older you get, the more serious you get. And many, many college athletes have said they stopped playing because it wasn't fun anymore. And, you're in charge of your fun. You're in charge of that. You can't blame that on people on the outside. You have to figure out how to keep it fun, and part of that is keep it fun, you know? Keep it fun.
Barb, I appreciate all the work that you're doing out there for families and student athletes. Again, I go back to thinking about my own experience as a former athlete. I didn't have these resources when I was in high school on how to navigate the recruiting process. I remember this and I'll never ever forget this. I was in my high school gym in Northern Illinois. A recruiting coach came down to visit me. And I thought I was big man on campus. I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going D1, like nobody's going to stop me." But I didn't even realize my grades weren't where they needed to
Yeah.
be. I didn't have any process in place to make sure that that school was even going to be a good fit for me. So the services you offer, the mentorship, the guidance that you give these families and athletes is so important because I think there are a lot of athletes and families who do get caught up in this business of college sports, and unfortunately they kind of catch the brunt end of all of this, and the colleges continue moving as they move, and some of these athletes are kind of stuck. So I want to also thank you for coming on to Coats in Conversation, for sharing your expertise in this space. Again, I think there's so many people out there that are looking for things that you have to offer. If anybody wanted to work with you, Barb, where can they find you?
Yeah, if you go to findmyteam.com, findmyteam.com is the website, and if you wanna schedule, just talk. If you just wanna talk about your situation, there's a little tab on top that just says schedule a session, schedule a free session. It doesn't cost you anything, there's no obligation, but it really can be something that sparks some desire in you and some help in what to do next, where you are and what to do next. And or you can just email me personally, Barb at findmyteam.com. It's pretty easy.
Much
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I didn't get to mention that, and also for participating in our Pathway to Play workshop. That was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Barb.